We're starting with a quadratic function or a quadratic equation. And we want to change it. When we complete the square, we're changing it in a specific way so that we can factor a portion of it into a perfect square. That's our goal for completing the square. For today, we're going to change our quadratic function so that we can figure out what the vertex is. So if we have a quadratic function, and we rewrite it as y equals x minus h squared, there's our perfect square, plus k. If we write our function like this, the vertex is at the point hk. Now this is when we completed the square yesterday. This is how we ended up when we were solving our equation. We wrote our equation like this, and then we subtracted this k to the other side and took the square root of both sides. So it's really the same thing that we did yesterday. But this, when we write it like this, it lets us pick out what the coordinates of the vertex are. Now notice when I go from the function to the coordinates, the x part changes sign. This is x minus h, and this is a plus h here. And the k, the y part, stays the same sign. So the x part, we change the sign. The y part stays the same. So we're going to complete the square so that we can write our quadratic function like this, so we can figure out what the vertex is. All right, so our steps. Our steps for completing the square. The first one is this, our quadratic function must equal y. So we need ax squared plus bx plus c equals y. When we were solving, we had to equal 0. Today we're not solving, we're just rearranging, so we have to equal y. Next step. Move c to the other side of the equal sign. It's exactly what we did yesterday, and we do that by adding or subtracting. We complete the square. And to complete the square, we add b divided by 2 squared to both sides. That's exactly what we did yesterday as well. That's the gist of completing the square, is adding b over 2 squared. Then we factor the perfect square. 2 x plus whatever b over 2 is, quantity squared. That's exactly what we did yesterday. So these three steps are the same steps that we used when we solved by completing the square. And then our last step is we get y by itself. Where yesterday we took the square root and then we got x by itself. When we're solving, we want to figure out what x is. Today we're just rearranging, so we want to write y equals something. So these three steps are exactly the same as the steps that we used yesterday. And yesterday, at the beginning, we had to equal 0. Today, we just have to equal y. So really, we're doing the same thing. All right, so questions on our steps. Okay, let's look at a couple of examples. We want to find the vertex of y equals x squared minus 4x minus 1 by completing the square. Now, before we find the vertex by completing the square, we have another way that we can find the vertex that we learned a little bit back. To remember what we did then. Remembering now will be helpful for what we do to help us with our quiz. It had to do with B and A and something B something. Very close. Negative B over 2A. We found negative b over 2a, that's the x-coordinate of the vertex. And then we plug that back into our function to figure out the y-coordinate of the vertex. So we have another way of finding the vertex. Completing the square is a second way. All right, so we already equal y. So that's good. And I'm going to rewrite this so I can do my stuff underneath. X squared minus 4x minus 1. My first step. I'm just going to label this A is 1, B is negative 4, C is negative 1. My first step is I want to move C to the other side of the equation. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So I get y plus 1 equals x squared minus 4x. Plus 1. Negative 1 plus 1, I just get 0. Now I'm going to complete the square. B over 2 is negative 4 over 2. B is negative 4, which is negative 2. And B over 2 squared is negative 2 squared, which is positive 4. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides now. Plus 4, plus 4. So I get y plus 5 equals x squared minus 4x plus 4. Well, adding b divided by 2 squared makes this quadratic part a perfect square. So now I can factor this. So I have y plus 5 equals x plus whatever b over 2 is. So x plus negative 2, quantity squared. And now I want to get y by itself. So I subtract 5 from both sides. And I get y equals x minus 2 squared minus 5. And now we can figure out the vertex. My vertex is at the point. I change the sign on this one that's with the x, 2. I keep the same sign here, negative 5. The vertex is at 2, negative 5. We change the sign on this part.
Oh, okay. Wait, sorry, wait, y?
x part, we change the sign on this number. The y part, we keep that number.
So it always has to be positive?
No. Whatever this is, if this is negative, we make it positive. If it's positive, we make it negative for the x part. The x part always changes signs. The y part stays the same. And you may also see when we write our quadratic function like this, we call this the vertex form of our quadratic function. Yes?
For negative b over 2a, what's that called? Like this one's called completing by the square. What's the other?
It doesn't have a special name. It's just, usually we just call it negative b over 2a. All right, so the steps that we used here, this part in here is really the same as what we did yesterday. The only difference is yesterday we had 0 here. And once we got here, that's when we took the square root of both sides. So the steps in this part are really the same steps. We're not doing anything different than we did before. All right, let's do one more example. We want to find the vertex of y equals x squared plus 2x minus 28 by completing the square. Well, I already have y equals. We have it equal to y. So that's good. I'm just going to label my A, B, and C. My first step is to move C to the other side of the equation. So I'm going to add 28. I'm going to rewrite it down here. So here I get y plus 28 equals x squared plus 2x. Minus 28 plus 28, I get a 0 there. Well, b divided by 2 is 2 divided by 2, which is 1. And b over 2 squared is 1 squared, which is 1. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides now. And when I do that, I get y plus 29 equals x squared plus 2x plus 1. This is now a perfect square. I can factor this. So I get y plus 29. This factors to x plus whatever b over 2 is. X plus 1, quantity squared. Now I want to get y by itself. So I subtract 29 from both sides. And I get y equals x plus 1 squared minus 29. And my vertex is going to be at the point. We change the sign on the part with the x. Negative 1. We keep this the same. Minus 29. Yes. When we complete the square, this will always factor to x plus whatever b over 2 is, quantity squared. That's what completing the square does. All right, so questions there. So really the process is very much the same as what we did yesterday. The only difference is yesterday we started with 0 instead of y. And then we took the square root to undo the squares and got x by itself. This is section 9.5. And our homework is going to be page 579, number 8 through 38. Every other even. Every other even, what that means, just a reminder. So we do 8, skip 10, do 12, skip 14, do 16, skip 18, do 20, etc.